Welcome to Civil Justice for SA Survivors.
Welcome back to Civil Justice for SA Survivors with attorneys Marc Pearlman and Melissa Anderson. Marc and Melissa represent survivors of SA, or sexual assault and exploitation, throughout Illinois. Their work focuses on accountability, safety, and empowerment through the civil justice system. I'm Lisa Mosby, and today we're talking about how pursuing a civil case can be part of the healing process and what justice can really mean for survivors beyond the courtroom. Welcome, Melissa. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you.
Hi,
Good morning.
to see you.
Good morning, Lisa.
Thank you. Healing and justice can mean very different things to different people. How do you describe the connection between the two in your work?
Lisa, it's correct. It means such different things for each one of our clients. And it's really important. The first thing that we really want to do once we decide with a client that we're going to move forward is really getting to know them in terms of what they're looking for. Because what justice and healing looks like for them can be different depending on each client. So, the healing piece of things is what we think the most important. And we really encourage our clients from the outset to focus on themselves and working on themselves and what they can control in the process. And our hope is by the end, regardless of the level of justice what people would typically see as justice, that whether or not there is the same accountability that they were hoping for, whether or not that happens, that they've still completed their healing journey the best they can throughout the process. So whether or not we necessarily have a monetary judgment or a monetary settlement at the end of the case, that is not, that doesn't define whether or not we've necessarily been successful. And we think our clients would agree. A lot of times you can have a large monetary settlement, but if the client, you and the client haven't worked to try to remember the important piece of trying to heal throughout the process, it feels a lot different at the end.
In the simplest form, healing has to do with how the survivor of SA feels, and justice has to do with the consequence with respect to the perpetrator or the institution that allowed it. But if you have healing, justice does become important, but not nearly as important as healing.
And I'm sure the idea of filing a lawsuit sounds stressful or even re-traumatizing for so many survivors. What makes the client decide, or some clients decide, that pursuing civil accountability is actually a part of that healing process?
Really good question, and something that I think we should clarify is that the vast majority of our cases, they don't result in the filing of a lawsuit. And the reason is that we take steps to initially reach out to the perpetrator and or the institution and see if they're interested in an alternative dispute resolution or something that may make it where we can get a resolution without necessarily going to court. But if they're not willing to engage in that kind of process, then we will file a lawsuit if our client is up for it, right? And when they file a lawsuit, again, they could do that confidentially. They can bring a suit as a John or Jane Doe.
And often filing a lawsuit is the last resort. And we explain that to our clients from the beginning, because our goal is that our clients have as much control over the process as possible. And when somebody has suffered through SA, their control has been taken away from them in such a profound way. So we think it's really important to make sure that our clients feel that they and are as much in control of the process as possible. And sadly, if you file a lawsuit, a lot of that control is taken away. A lot of it's dictated by the court and what the court says you have to do and when you have to do it. So we really do everything we can to see if there's a way to reach some level of justice and accountability and resolution without having to go through the legal civil process in court.
That said, while it's the last option because we think that's best for our client, it is a very real option, and one that often brings a feeling of power to our clients, because if the other side isn't willing to discuss healing and justice, then we will go to a court of law and the court of public opinion, and that oftentimes could be very, very healing and empowering to our clients.
Can you actually give us an example of what it looks like when a client begins to feel validated through the process, when their story is formally acknowledged or believed?
Yeah, we have a great example, because Melissa and I talk about this all the time. Oftentimes, if we are in a process that's trying to resolve the case short of going to court, our clients will give a statement, and the statement is not a deposition, so it's not an adversarial statement. It's getting information, and usually our clients are extremely anxious before that, and understandably so. Usually about 20 to 30 minutes into the statement, we see our client's posture go from like this to like this. And by the end of it, they walk out a very different person than they walked in. And it's one of the greatest things about our work is recognizing when that moment has arrived.
How empowering. And I'm sure every survivor's path is unique. So, how do you and your team pace things so that the legal process doesn't overwhelm? I'm sure some folks come in stronger, or some are being re traumatized by this experience. So, how do you slow that roll so it doesn't overwhelm people who are still going through the recovery process?
By its nature, even if you are in court or if you're not, and we've engaged in some alternative process to try to resolve a claim, by its nature, it takes time. So in that regard, time's on our side, in the sense that we aren't able to push something through necessarily very quickly, and that our clients do benefit from that. So, a lot of times throughout, what I think is important, because there is, you don't want this to go on forever either, because that's not healthy for our clients either. But I think what's important is checking in and having a sense of where your client is in their healing as the process goes forward, so that you can do everything possible to make sure that they are moving along with the process. So in terms of their healing, that they're not still stuck where they were when we started from a healing standpoint. And, one other thing that I do want to mention, it's really encouraging. In the beginning, you often have clients who say at the beginning, I want a letter from the defendant, from the other side, from the institution, acknowledging this happened to me and apologizing and taking full responsibility. And that's often, that's coming from a place of that's what they think they need to heal. And it's interesting, because often they come in saying that, and by the end, we say to them, is that something you're still interested in? Because nothing's outside the realm of possibility in terms of what we can ask for. And we encourage our clients, give it some thought. What are you really looking for from the other side? And when we get to the end of the process, we say, is that something you're still interested in? And it really feels good when they say, yeah, I don't really care one way or the other how they feel about this, or whether or not they believe me, or they're sorry. And that is really an indication that our clients have done what they need to do to heal as best they can, because it's no longer whether or not they have a good day, or whether or not they're thinking about the essay. That is, they feel empowered, and whether or not they have a good day is going to be up to them, regardless of how anyone else feels about what happened to them. So that's really encouraging at the end of the process when we see that happen. And most of the time, that's what we see.
And there have been times where, very, very seldom, but there have been occasions where we have a case that comes in, it's open and it's open and closed in terms of everybody knows this happened. There's no statute of limitation problem, and we can resolve the case quickly. And that always is a difficult situation for us, because we recognize that simply getting a client a monetary settlement in 10 days really isn't giving them the healing and justice that they need. And then oftentimes that could be detrimental, because you haven't gone through the healing process. So it's really, and we share that with our clients. We tell them, look, this isn't something you should be looking to resolve in a week, because if you do, you're not going to get the healing and the justice that you're really looking for.
Can you guys speak to the role that support networks or family or advocates or counselors play in helping the survivors to stay grounded during a civil case?
Yeah, that's huge. It's huge. And everybody has a different support group. And some people have one person and other people have a village. But it's really important to have someone, whether it be a mental health professional, a family member, a friend, and it doesn't have to be one person. It's great to have, again, a community of people that support you. And for a lot of our clients, they believe they've never told anybody about this. Most of the time, we're the first people they've ever told, and they're very reluctant to tell the people that are typically their support people, because they're embarrassed, or it's been so many years. How do I tell them now? And aren't they going to be upset that I didn't tell them this, 15 years ago? And the answer almost universally is no. People who care about you and love you and are your friend and your family, they're going to respond exactly how you would want them to, which is with support and love and understanding.
Mm-hmm. And it's encouraging, often, like Marc said, sometimes we're the first person that anyone's ever disclosed the SA to. And that's heartbreaking in the sense that they've carried this by themselves for so long. What science has even shown is once you tell one person, you're actually, from a physical standpoint, even healing right then, just getting it off your chest. But what's really encouraging to see is, often when people come in because of SA, they feel so much shame and embarrassment and responsibility for what happened to them. And, as much as we can tell them this is not your fault, you are not responsible and there's nothing to be embarrassed about, often we're the first person. And then as what we've said and through the process and through healing, once that really sinks in, it's so good to see that, 6 months or a year into the process, we'll get a call and say, I just told my wife, somebody that they've been with for decades that didn't know, and that they've shared with their wife or their adult children what happened to them. And that's so good to see when you see someone's support system just grow like that. And that's really one of the positive things that I see come out of people coming forward.
And I hear that it makes such a huge difference in the healing of a survivor going through this process. Can you share an example or two where pursuing a civil case led to a broader change? For example, promoting an institution to reform policies or increase accountability, something that you've actually witnessed that was maybe monumental in making a difference.
Absolutely. Certainly we've had many cases against religious institutions, and they have changed how they deal with SA significantly. But I want to be clear, they haven't changed significantly because internally they have concluded that that's the right thing to do necessarily. They've changed because our clients have come forward and they have realized from talking to our clients, one, how profoundly hurt they have been, and two, that that they're going to be held accountable by the public at large if they don't make changes to make sure that children are safe.
And a great example too is just in Illinois, the fact that there's no longer a statute of limitations for child sex abuse is the result of people having come forward. Had all of the, brave people that have come forward not done that, things would not have changed at all. People would still have 2 years after they turn 18 years old to bring a claim. And because of all of the people that have decided to come forward, that's why there's no statute anymore. That's not, that didn't happen by accident.
Another thing, and I'm going to make a generalization, but oftentimes there's nothing more difficult or stressful in your life than carrying a secret, because it's always there. It always is impacting you. And it literally can start, eating away at you from the inside. So, oftentimes for our clients, just getting that secret out there is a really big step in their recovery and healing.
Melissa, Marc, thank you so much for today. And that's it for today's episode of Civil Justice for SA Survivors with Marc Pearlman and Melissa Anderson. If you'd like to learn more or speak confidentially with their team, please visit pearlmananderson.com for resources, contact information, or your next step. And again, come on back next week. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.